Yeah, I suppose I'll just tee off. I'll give you a bit of my background and then sort of how Mental Mates come to be, and then just a few things that I've learned over probably really the last 15 years. I grew up on a farm in Millthorpe in New South Wales, and went to uni in Armidale, did ag science there, which saw me get a job managing a mango farm in Katherine. And so that's how my journey to the NT started. And I've been up here for about 14 years now, done a whole heap of different stuff in that 14 years. A big peanut farm out of Katherine for a while, and then started my own contracting business. Around 2011, with the live export ban, my business was effectively shut down because of the ban, which had a large part to play in some of my mental health issues. So I went from a hay contractor and then on to running mining camps, and then finally becoming a diesel fitter, which is where I am now. I've battled with my mental health for quite a long time. Like in hindsight, looking back, probably had anxiety and a bit of depression from a young fella in high school, especially in those last couple of years, trying to get good results in HSCs and things like that. I never performed well in exams because I'd worked myself up that much that I couldn't concentrate, and the anxiety got to me a bit. In saying that, anxiety fueled me to be a reasonable footballer. I wasn't anything too special, but I got to play representative football at a local level and that, and I was only a little fella, so it did fuel me to probably punch a bit above my weight. When I left uni, I sort of found it harder and harder to deal with my anxiety. I as blokes do, even trying to turn to mates and say, look, I don't feel right. I'm not sure what's going on. I can't. And, as always, I'll have a few beers. You'll be right. It'll pass. And it didn't. It got worse and worse. And, about, when was it? Around 2004, I crashed a car, and I couldn't tell the hospital staff if I'd done it on purpose or not. I got a bit of amnesia from that, and but it was definitely something I'd thought about doing is crashing a car on purpose to suicide. And when I went to hospital for that and told them that story, and they again, I saw a counsellor there. He said, "No, I don't think you have depression. I think you're probably just a bit sad, and it'll pass. Just keep sticking at your footy and that, and you'll be right." So I left the hospital thinking that there wasn't anything going on, and kept battling along, and moved to the Territory, and my drinking probably got heavier, self-medicating, and I tried to bury myself into my work, which probably lost. I was managing a $21 million infrastructure project on a peanut farm at 23. So, I was very driven and motivated, but behind the scenes I was a wreck. From that, I went on to start my own business, again fueled heavily by anxiety, and when the live export ban hit, it broke me quick, and that went on to see me to attempt my life a second time. At that time, if it wasn't for some really close mates, one who was quite a distance away, and one in town here, but they knew something wasn't right, and at that stage, we didn't know who to go see or talk to, but we wrestled with the system for probably 5 years before I went and got I admitted myself into a mental health hospital in Sydney, where I got a psychiatrist and a psychologist that I could see via Skype. By then, my career had seen me sort of do a lot of bushwork in the NT, working in quite remote places. But having that doctor there via Skype, it didn't matter if I was in town, 800k from town, wherever I was. I could have been overseas. I had that support when things weren't going right to help me through working with my medication and working on a wholeness, I suppose, in my life to make sure that I wasn't just so focused on work or sport or any one thing, which whether anxiety is quite a common trait. I think you get really focused on one thing and a lot of other aspects of your life can fall in the wayside. With that experience, I've played in a rugby club in Katherine called the Brahmins for the whole time I've been here, and we lost two young fellas in 3 years to suicide, and that really hit home for me because there was a couple of people that knew about my experience, but it could have easily been 3 or 4 in that same time period. That we're a tight knit group, but we just weren't talking about it, and people get very good at hiding the signs, I suppose. Which is where I did a bit of research and found a course called Mental Health First Aid. There's a few courses that we as mental mates run now called Safe Talk and Mental Health First Aid. We try and deliver them free to the community. And we really felt, it was me and a few other people from Brahmins really felt that this was probably going to be the biggest tool that we could give people to pick up signs in someone and hopefully help them along the way to get professional help, because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar in the Northern Territory with the Northern Territory on here tonight, but it is very difficult to find professional services in the rural and remote NT especially, and it's probably not, from what I've heard, it's probably not that different in rural and remote places in other states. Our idea was that if you'd done mental health first aid, that keeping in mind that it could be 4 or 5 days to get someone to a professional, to get them to proper help, that if you've done the training that you could help them be here for that time and get them to that professional help. So that's why we started Mental Mates. We've been pretty lucky. The community here had a really good uptake. But in saying that, suicide's something that's touched everyone in Katherine. It's our rates in the Territory and the Kimberley are twice the national average. And I don't know, a lot of it gets reported as in Indigenous numbers, but the numbers up here, it's no different. It doesn't matter who you are, what background you're from. Really, there was no difference, I suppose. For me, it was the trouble in actually finding that doctor back then. Like telehealth's come a long way, especially with what Megan and what Rural Health Connect's doing. We really strongly support that. It's I don't know, I wish it had been around when I was trying to work out my stuff, because I mightn't have got to the level where I needed to be. Hospital, I was in hospital in North Shore in Sydney for 2 weeks to work out, what was going on and find a doctor down there that I could talk to with Skype. So it was a bit different situation for me, because I had to fly to Sydney. I had met with that doctor face to face pretty intensely for 2 weeks, so we had a pretty good rapport. And then when I come back to the Territory, then the Skype, really, it was no issue. And we even had a few sessions where the internet wasn't anywhere near good enough, and we, which I'm sure all of you know with the satellite broadband, but we chatted over the phone, and because we'd built that rapport, it was. I don't find it any different at all. Yeah. just going on, I'll share a few, I don't know, things I've picked up over the years in trying to, through doing mental health first aid and just my own experiences and how to pick up and how to talk to people that you might think not in a good way, I suppose. And the courses we run, so Safe Talk's one of them. There is an online one getting around at the moment. It's a 4-hour course, and it very much deals with the pointy end, I suppose, of suicide, and how to deal with someone that's in crisis. They've either attempted to take their life, or they're very close. In those situations, it's very important, I suppose, to stay calm and try and engage with the person as best you can. They can be very hard to communicate when they're in that space. I've found the easiest way to do it, but is to be very direct. There's no point beating around the bush, and you can ask how they're feeling, and if they say, most of them will say shit, and then but you've got to ask directly, are you thinking of suicide? And that's the most important thing you'll learn out of any of the courses, is to be direct and straight to the point. And someone that's thinking of suicide, or has just attempted, and you've got there, and they haven't been, I don't know, for lack of the better word, successful, I suppose. Being direct is the best you can be, because they need to get to professional help straight away. You need to know exactly where they're at with it. And people in that situation, I haven't found one yet that'll lie about it. They're at the end. They're in their mind, and certainly was in my mind, that you've got no more avenues to look down. Just being direct, asking, have they thought of suicide? People won't lie about that. If they say yes, then you need to start going through the motions to get them to help, and do it as soon as possible. And it's important the whole time to stay calm, and be sympathetic, I suppose, to the situation. Not, oh, that was silly, or, you shouldn't be feeling that way, or anything like that, because it's not really helpful, I suppose. So, I suppose a bit further back from that is where we do the mental health first aid course. So it runs for 2 days, and it'll show you a fair few more of the earlier signs if someone's, especially around depression, anxiety, or bipolar, and just what to pick up on a little bit, and how to start a conversation with someone that's, they're not, they might have thought about suicide, but they're not at crisis point yet. I suppose the biggest things I've picked up on out of those for symptoms is, if someone says they haven't had a decent night's sleep for months, ask them why. A lot of the time, that's a lot of anxiety, and sleep is essential. If you're not sleeping, you're not yourself. The other one's eating, especially in blokes. Like, I don't know, especially rural blokes. Like, if they're out doing a physical job and they're off their tucker, there's something going on. And if it's not something obvious like the flu or something like that, there's like it's a very obvious one, I suppose. And once if you do get a chance to do a course like that, I'd highly recommend it. And some of the things that you pick up on in those courses, and just some of the subtle signs that they mention in those, you'll go, geez, such and such was like that just the other day. Like, it's mental illness, and especially depression and anxiety, that common. It won't take long for you to go, oh, gee, I know someone like that. Or you might even go, gee, I'm a bit like that. We get that a lot, going, wow, I'm in the early stages of depression or anxiety. I suppose a lot of mental health stuff, the emphasis is on getting the individual to speak out and reach out for help. And I knew from my experience, you already feel like you're a massive burden on the world, and it can be. It's just you don't even think about asking for help really. Like you don't want to, especially I don't know. Most people, especially blokes, feel like when they're in that space, they feel like a burden already, and they don't want to burden anyone else. Yeah, so I think it's important that the rest of the community can try and pick up the slack a little bit and pick up on signs and start the conversation for them. I think that it goes a long way to seeing more people actually get professional help and doing it before it gets to a point where they are at crisis, they are about to suicide. So. It can be difficult, and that conversation can go over weeks, I suppose, to get people to, I suppose, in a way, get the confidence to actually go seek help. And quite one I've got a lot is I don't need a shrink, I don't need to see a doctor. Like I'll be right, I'll sort this out. And the line I use the most now in that situation is, mate, we can talk about things and that might help a little bit, but if it's not fixing it, then you need to talk to someone that can help you retrain your brain a little bit so you're not thinking that way. And I'm not that person. I'm a mechanic. I don't know how to give you cognitive therapy. I suppose it's just making them realise that you don't have to sort everything out yourself, and having depression or anxiety can be in some years nearly as common as getting the flu. Like 1 in 5 people get mental illness over their lifetime. So you're definitely not alone, and there is plenty of help out there. And if you've got a bad enough flu, you wouldn't hesitate going to the doctor or going even just to the chemist and getting tablets. So this shouldn't be any different. You need to try and get some help. And some people it's as easy as putting them on like the Black Dog Institute website or Beyond Blue and just going through some of the checklists on there and learning different techniques that they can do to try and work with their depression and anxiety, especially in the early stages. And that might be enough to get them through for a bit. But if it keeps going on and on, it's, I don't know, you just need to reinforce, get like professional help is the way to go. I suppose since being mental mates, it's been, especially early on, people were just looking for professional help that much that they thought that we were a counselling service, and they kept asking us for advice. And we had to really quickly nip it in the bud and say, look, this is not what we do. We're not health professionals. This is like give out a list of phone numbers or doctors that you can see. And that's why we were so keen to partner with Megan with Rural Health Connect, because it does take a lot of the hard work out of being able to connect to a professional when you do have access to telehealth, and it's a game changer, I feel, for rural people. Yeah, definitely. Like people, I don't know. It would be it wouldn't be normal not to be anxious, I suppose. It's just the level that it gets to that. I don't know, if you let it become overwhelming, overbearing, then that's too much. But anxiety is just stress at the end of the day, and stress. One of the major things that's helped me with my anxiety is treating stress in a positive way instead of a negative. If someone's pissing off at work or something, and work's getting quite stressful, you're under the pump to get deadlines done or whatever. Turning that into a positive isn't easy to do all the time, but just at least I'm busy. I'm putting food on the table at home. I've got X, Y, Z in my life that is positive right now. And just go back to focusing on the positives with any stress or because at the end of the day, stress is what causes anxiety, and anxiety gets bad when it's just a loop going around in your head and you can't shut it down. So to break that loop early and focus on the positives would be I suppose, my advice and what's worked for me. I suppose even early on with depression and that, if you think someone is a bit depressed, it is still important to ask directly, have they thought about suicide, and then how far they've actually thought about it. There's different stages of that, from like early on, they might just think, oh, it could be the way to go. And then moving on, you'll think about a method. And then if you're thinking about writing notes and that's getting pretty serious. So that's why it's important to be direct about that language. But at the same time, I suppose even in the early stages, you're starting to get pretty fragile, I suppose, and being told what to do when you can't really work out what to do yourself, it doesn't help, I suppose, and that's why it is important to just rattle off the advantages of going and seeing a professional and explaining that I can be a shoulder and I'll help you through the process, but I'm not a professional. I'm not sure what direction to take you in to I suppose help alleviate the depression or anxiety. And the hardest thing is too, like, even if you've had depression or anxiety yourself, and what works for you, it more than likely won't work for them. It's mental illness is so different for everyone, and even depression and anxiety, the way they get labelled, it sort of sounds like everyone goes through the same thing, but it can be very different for each individual. So it's important to be sympathetic to what they're going through, and it might sound trivial to you, or not like it, whatever's triggering their depression should be a big deal, but if it is to them, then you've got to take that on face value and try and work with that to get them to professional help. Yep. So the main one we're doing at the moment's called Safe Talk, and it's a 4-hour course that just predominantly looks at suicide crisis prevention. So when, if you come across someone that's really in a bad way, that they've thought about suicide a lot, how to speak with them and how to de-escalate the situation, I suppose, to get them to professional help. That one, we've been running that pretty heavily for the last 2 years, and we've been working with Catherine High School. So the idea was the most vulnerable age group, I suppose, is from sort of 16 through to 25-year-olds, and we thought if we can get it into the high school and get those kids thinking about it and how they interact with each other even might change a little bit, because they might. Because Dolly's Dream's been born from Catherine as well. Bullying did come into the spectrum, and the work Dolly's Dream's done with the high school here. We thought it'd be good to tack onto that and offer the Safe Talk as well, so that if kids were for whatever reason getting to that point, and hopefully their mates would step up and get them to professional help. So. That's the first one, and one we've run the whole time is mental health first aid. So there's a few variants of mental health first aid. There's a youth mental health first aid and an Indigenous mental health first aid. We've predominantly done Indigenous and just the mainline mental health first aid. And I suppose I'd recommend doing a 4-hour course first, and there's a fair few different versions of that too. There's so the 4-hour versions I know of, there's a Safe Talk. Wesley Mission run a suicide prevention course, which is 4 hours. Mental health first aid do a short course as well. So there's a lot of different versions of that, but if you hear of a 4-hour suicide prevention course, that's sort of you'll get the basics out of that. and what we found was people would do that and then they'd want to learn more. So that's where the 2-day course had come into it with mental health first aid. And we had a really strong uptake with that. We were running it after work hours over 4 weeks. So you do 4-hour sessions over 4 weeks. And I think we've put about 800 or 900 people through that one. But it looks at a lot of the finer details, I suppose, to try and pick up on, and it goes into a bit more about different mental illnesses and some of the symptoms of them. Like, it doesn't just Safe Talk will focus heavily on preventing a suicide, whereas mental health first aid encourages you to intervene a lot earlier, and it will show you the symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety and depression mainly, but it does touch on the other ones as well. So it is a lot more thorough, and I don't know, I suppose I feel it probably builds a bit more confidence if you do have the chance to do the 2-day course to how to what language to use and how to get someone to professional help. So we're working on there is Safe Talk do offer an online course, but it's all from the US and it's quite dry, and a lot of their scenarios, I suppose, aren't really applicable, especially for rural Australia. So we're looking at, hopefully in the next 12 months, coming up with our own that does focus on rural Australia, because that's our focus, I suppose. But there'd be no reason why anyone couldn't do it. So yeah. When we first started Mental Mates, we tried to get it directly into sporting clubs, and we wanted the actual players to uptake the training and that, and especially in rugby, it's a young demographic. We had players from 16 to I don't know, I retired at 34, so and we've had blokes play till they're 40. So but the best uptake was definitely with the senior players. They were keen to do a bit of training. We pretty much had to force the young fellas to do it. But when we did, there was 3 or 4 of them come away from that and said, shit, I think I've got depression, and actually went and did something about it. So the change in, I suppose, what I've noticed is there's been a lot more of a sympathetic ear around the club, and blokes not afraid to pull someone aside and just say, look, mate, how are you really going? Like, you're putting on a pretty brave face here, but there's something going on. And because, I suppose, because everyone knows that there's people that have been trained in it now, that they're less likely to try and bullshit to you and say, yeah, there is something going on. What do you reckon? And you can start working with them to work out a plan to help them sort it out. So I suppose at face value, you probably wouldn't see much difference in the club, but underneath, especially in the senior members of the club, and that comes down to coaching staff and the president of the club, and that Catherine's quite a transient town, so the players come and go a lot. So it's quite hard to pin the players down to do training, to do any mental health training, and but with that good senior support group, definitely seen a lot better behaviours and reactions, I suppose, when someone is a bit off. I suppose stigma is one, like, especially in that younger demographic, trying to convince them that the training was a good thing to do. I think the biggest stigma around that, but wasn't the actual mental health side of it, because quite all those young fellas, if they hadn't known the 2 boys that did take their life already, they knew someone. And the degrees of separation weren't that big. So, but having just left school, a lot of them, and doing apprenticeships and that, you put the word training in front of it, and tell them they got to do it on a weekend. And no way. You know, you're not cutting into my beer drinking or fishing time. So that was quite a challenge. And it pretty much come down to the senior members of the club just going, look, obviously you don't have to do this, but it is important, and you won't, you know, that there's stuff that we learned having gone through losing those fellas, that, you know, if we had known that before, like we really regret not knowing more of this info a lot earlier, I suppose, and that got that over the line. Another challenge that we face is that there is a lot of organisations about, and people will try and I suppose join your organisation, or like, I don't know, if you're thinking of starting something similar to Mental Mates in your own community, you will get a lot of noise from outside what you think it should be. So very early on, I knew that if we were going to do this well, we had to be focused on one. Well, the main goal was reducing suicides, but we had to be focused on what was the best way to do that. And for us, it was getting as many people in the community trained, so we had eyes on vulnerable people as much as possible, and could intervene early. And so we, you know, the training was obviously a solution for us, but the whole time we've had noise coming in, why don't you try this or try that, or, you know, do this, like go along a different path. And we've sort of blocked out the noise and said, no, we believe training's the solution for this, and just stuck to our guns. And I think that's very important, especially for a small community organisation, because it is very easy to get distracted and go on a side path and not achieve the goal you set out to get. So, and the other challenge in the territory that we faced was what professional help was out there. So a lot of people, especially early on, great, we've done the training. Like we've done a lot of surveying after our training. So for everyone trained, they've gone on to help 5 people within 12 months of doing the training, which we thought was phenomenal. And it's had a massive spread across the community, I suppose. But in saying that, then we were starting to get a lot of feedback going, right, I've got them to calm down. We've got them to accept that they might need to see professional help. Where's the professional help? And, you know, the services are quite limited. So that's why we thought of going down the same route as Rural Health Connect, but we didn't know where to start. None of us are that computer savvy or that. I knew that there were professionals in the cities that wanted to help people in the bush, but there was no medium there for them. And then I went to a funding meeting, and that's when they put me on to. They said there's someone doing exactly that, and that's when they put me on to Megan. And that we will push that pretty heavily here, because at the moment we've just lost in the next month we'll lose our GP clinic in Katherine. So pretty much it'll only be the hospital and a few of the Indigenous corporation medical facilities. But if you're not Indigenous, they won't let you in pretty much. So so I think it's very important that we pick up the slack with the telehealth, and I think telehealth's important when you are feeling that vulnerable anyway, because a lot of the time I don't know, if you're bad enough, you won't even want to leave your own house to go see a professional. So that's where telehealth can really, really help. I think you can do it in the comfort of your home, and I think that makes a massive difference. So. It has been frustrating over the years seeing a few things like "Are you okay?" and that, they come through Katherine, and I ask them. I said, "Well, you know, it's good to ask, 'Are you okay?' Do you tell them what to ask next?" if they say no, what do you say? Yeah, and that's where the training is. That's why we push the training so hard. And the other part is that, like I said early on, that so much emphasis on the person to speak out. Like, it's not weak to speak. There's another one with living and that. And yeah, they are. It is good to try and encourage people to go out and speak, but when you're in that headspace, it can quite often be the last thing you want to do. So it's important for the rest of us, I suppose, to try and pick up on the signs and help them out. Yeah.